Good morning, everybody. It's Rob Tanner here from Aware360. Oh, wait, hold on one second. Good morning, everybody. It's Rob Tanner here from Aware360. We've just got a few folks just logging in, so we'll give them about another minute, and then we'll get underway. Alrighty. So first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us this morning. As I mentioned before, I'm Rob Tanner from Aware360. Just a couple housekeeping items very, very quickly. We've got the audience in listen-only mode. So please, if you have any questions, type them into the sidebar on your screen, and we'll certainly get to those at the end because we're going to do a couple of things. We've got questions at the end, and we're also going to do a couple of quick polls throughout the presentation here. So if you're able to, please do respond back to those. We'd appreciate it. The session this morning will be about 1 hour in total length. We're going to do about 45 minutes of presenting and demonstration of our work alone solution, and then follow that by about 15 minutes for questions and answers. And certainly, you know, as always, if you've got any questions or concerns afterwards, you can feel free to talk to one of us. So just as an introduction as to who we are, let me just flip you over here. There we go. So that should be coming on your screen. There you go. So as I mentioned, I'm Rob Tanner. I'm the guy on the left. I'm the account manager here at Aware360, handling all of the government business that we do here across the province, specifically with the county's municipalities. But we've also got Kaz from STARS on board. He's going to be leading you through a bit of some of the presentation a bit later on. As well, I've got Garrett on your screen here. We've had a last-minute cancellation on Garrett, unfortunately, so we've got Al Renner, who works closely with Garrett, filling in for him. He's going to be going through the actual application that runs on a smartphone. He's going to be going through some of the back-end information for you as well. So without further ado, I'll just move right into our agenda for our session today. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the state of lone worker safety first. I just want to give you an overview of, you know, sort of who we are and what's going on with lone worker. We're going to talk a little bit about evaluating worker risk, and part of what I'm going to do there is go through some use cases of the folks that we're currently monitoring, and the objective there would be for me to help sort of solidify in your heads as to who would be defined as a lone worker within your county or municipality, and identify those. Talk a little bit about compliance and legislation. I know a lot of you probably already do know what the legislation is, but specifically we'll talk a little bit about how we address the legislation and how we've been working with them for a number of years in putting together our solution to actually meet and exceed the requirements under the GOA legislation. We're going to talk about how the technology works and show you how it works. And then what we're going to do is move right into a actual incident escalation through response and show you what is going on at kind of the front end and the back end and how we resolve that. And talking about what's going on at the back end, of course, we're going to talk about a little bit about monitoring, the different options that are available, and why you would want to take a look at getting monitored and the benefits of doing that. So without further ado, I'll just get right into the meat of it. Now, the first thing, some of you, I think most of you would know who Aware360 is. Aware360 has been around as Aware360 for a couple of years, but most of you would probably know us as Gemini. Most of you probably know Frank. A lot of them personally know Frank, but a lot of us are known as CAMs. So we've been in the marketplace for 25 years. We have a standing offer agreement with the government of Alberta as their lone worker solution across the government. We've got about 85% of the counties and municipalities across the province are currently using our CAM solution to run their municipality. So we've got a fair number of, we've got some pretty good experience in the marketplace here. In addition to the lone worker, which is what we're going to talk about today, we do have solutions for journey management. Of course, we've got our fleet management, which would be what most of the counties and municipalities are using, as well as some video analytics. A little bit about the scope of what we do. We've got 30,000 events per day, and a lot of you are probably saying, well, what the heck is an event? An event is actually a person signing on to the system, signing off of the system. It would be a grader starting up in the morning and signing into our CAM system. It would be any of those we would classify as an event, and those are coming through our systems and are being monitored by us. We've got 15,000 of these people, places, and or things being monitored at the current time, with about 115 clients. We are based in Calgary, and we've got about 50 employees here. So that's a little bit about who we are. So getting right into the meat of what is a lone worker and what type of lone worker are you. So at a very high level, when we talk about what is a lone worker, the definition is that the lone worker is someone who performs hazardous duties away from the public. And as I say, I'll get into some use cases very quickly. Someone who works alone or in an isolated site. Someone who handles cash. They may not be a lone worker in the traditional sense of being by themselves, but they are a higher risk. And a lot of it comes down to risk and what type of risk you're getting into during your day. Someone who travels away from the office and interacts with customers, or someone who travels alone and has no interaction with customers. So that at a higher level is really what the definition of a lone worker is. But if we start taking a closer look at actual use cases, and again, the objective here was to help you identify within your county and municipality who would be eligible or who would benefit from the protection of a lone worker solution and a system, and who would be under compliance, in order to be compliant, should be covered under a lone worker solution. I tried to kind of put a matrix together here as we've got rural and city on the left, and we've got no interactions kind of on the left, moving to the right, out to many interactions with a lot of people. Up in the upper left corner, you can see I've got people like park rangers. Park ranger is someone who's out, and we have a lot of park rangers within the Alberta government. I don't know if I mentioned before, we've got about 5,000 people within the Alberta government being monitored right now with our lone worker solution. Park rangers is certainly a large group, and fish and wildlife. Those are typically those individuals who are working in rural locations with very little interaction with other people. So they are at risk by nature of, maybe they're sitting in a tower, so that, they're not going to get, the biggest risk there is their lack of ability to communicate to somebody and get assistance if required. We've got Wildfire Recovery Task Force. We've got, here we're moving up in Fort Mac. We've done a lot of work specifically with the people up in Fort Mac. They're not so rural. I guess they're up there rebuilding that community, and they're starting to get more interactions. But these guys need to know, we need to know where these folks are. We need to know exactly if they run into an issue, we need to be able to with pinpoint accuracy, send help to them as quickly as possible. We've got university field researchers as we're moving up to many, many interactions. I'm going to jump way over to the upper right corner, which arguably, we can move this one up or down, but we've got CPOs. We've got about 80% of the community peace officers on our work alone system with the government of Alberta today. Most of you counties, the larger counties and municipalities would have CPOs. They're all being monitored by our work alone solution. OH inspectors are currently, those are both in the city and rural. all OHS inspectors are actually mandated within the government to use our work alone solution. And then you can move down to the bottom where we've got, say, a city worker who would be within Alberta Health Services. We cover them as well. Someone working in their addictions and mental health group, where they are having a lot of, in the city, but they're having a lot of interactions with individuals. They're at a high risk because they don't know what to expect from those folks. Kind of in the middle, and so I'm hoping that you're getting an idea and a feeling for the types of individuals in your area that would be that would require this for safety and compliance. In the middle, one of the largest groups that you're probably all familiar with in the counties and municipalities. We're signing up. One of the first groups that we typically sign up are the guys and girls working out at the transfer sites, because they're out there in typically a somewhat rural location where help is not always readily available, and different individuals of unknown background typically are showing up at the site, and they don't know who they are, but they've got to, we've got to offer them some kind of a safety net so that they can, they're able to respond if they need help. So we're going to launch a quick poll, and I'm just, if some of you have any ideas or thoughts on individuals that you maybe are not on this list within your county or municipality, if you could feel free to please type something in there, and I'll give you just a minute to do that. I would appreciate it. Okay, so we'll proceed on a little bit here. So, at the end of the day, this whole solution that we've got is, there's, two objectives. Number one is to provide safety for the folks out and safety for your employers or employees. It is also developed, so for safety is number one. Number two, it is developed for compliance. All right? So taking a look at what's going on with worker compliance, we're looking on the left here of the non-compliant. A few years ago, we were in a situation where, people were starting, we didn't have any controls in place at all. So then, of course, we start with the basic, okay, great, let's put together some kind of a plan. Let's put together, a clipboard that people will check on their way out of the office. And, that was in the past, that's what we started to do, was very basic compliance. With the OH&S group, they're saying, hey, you've got to have a plan of some kind in place in order to hit that first level of compliance. So that's where sort of the basic compliance is. Hey, we've got a plan. We think it's probably being followed. So, typically a lot of those are monitored in-house. And what we've been doing over the years is we've started to apply technology to it. So we started adding location services. Location services giving you the ability to know exactly where a worker is when they hit that hot button or when they hit that SOS or when they're overdue on a timer, so that not only do we know that they're in distress, but we know exactly where they are, and we can get to their immediate location as quickly as possible. And then we moved up to really where we would call, today's world, which is real-time monitoring with exception-based alerts. And I know that sounds like a lot, it's kind of a mouthful, but what we're doing is that we are monitoring in real time the status of your workers. They're being monitored typically by a third-party monitoring service, so that there is a professional response personnel on the other end of the line should they require assistance. And with the exception-based services that we've put together with our application and our back end, the system itself is taking care of most of the triggers and most of the alerts, so that the system is automatically telling the worker that they're coming up to a safety timer or they're coming up to an end of shift timer. So it's automatically prompting them to go to the next step, to check in or to check out of the system at the end of the day, without actually the intervention of a person and without causing alarm for the rest of the folks, and it's keeping it's keeping us compliant, and it's keeping your workers safe. So at the end of the day, that's where it is. Now, just another quick poll that Aaron's going to launch here as to what level would best describe your level of compliance? So if you wouldn't mind giving a quick check on that, that would be great. So I'll give you just a quick I'll give you a quick minute here to take a look at and fill out that poll. Thanks. Oh, I see a few of you checking off. That's great. Thank you. All righty. So thank you. There we go. You should be, new slide should be up for you. Taking a look, and I know that most of you do know the Alberta Work Alone legislation. I've given you a quick overview of it here. And I wanted to, in looking at this, really highlight how our solution, I guess from a high level, here's kind of what our solution does, all right? So our solution was developed in conjunction with the occupational health and safety folks with the government of Alberta to meet all of the legislative requirements for that. So the app gives you, compliance with the legislation. And basically what it does is it allows the worker a couple of things, and it goes right directly to this. We have at a bare minimum, we have beginning of shift and end of shift. And as I mentioned, Al will be going through this with you and showing you how exactly this works. But here's me telling you what we're going to tell you in a minute. So there's beginning of shift and there's an end of shift. So that you sign in the morning and you have to sign out at the end of the day. Throughout the day, based upon level of risk, we have safety timers. Now that safety timer is that, say, every hour or 2 hours throughout the day, we have to, according to the legislation, including regular contact, and you can see at the bottom there, regular contact with our workers throughout the day. So there's this safety timer that throughout the day the worker has to check in on the system. We've built into the system a few features such as automatically checks you in on your safety timer if you're moving in a vehicle. That's to conform with the distracted driving legislation. So there's some pieces there, that details that we can certainly get into in more detail. So we've got beginning of shift, end of shift. We've got regular periods throughout the day. And then at any time during the day, we have a hazard timer. That is, an individual is going into a hazardous situation. They're stepping into, CPOs would be using this in their 10, their 10 codes and so on. I'm pulling somebody over. I'm going to go over, I'm approaching the offender's vehicle. So if I'm not back in my vehicle in 5 minutes, set off the alarm. Or I'm proceeding into a house to take a look at a healthcare worker at Alberta Health Service. I'm proceeding into a house I have not been in before. There's a strange car in the driveway. If I have not come out within within 15 or 20 minutes, then set off the alarm. So that you've got that hazard timer, and of course at any time during the workday you have an SOS. So we're going to go into that in some detail. Al's going to show you how that does. So that's beginning of shift, end of shift, regular times throughout the day. We've got a hazard timer, and of course the SOS button. All right, so that's kind of the overview of how the app works, and we'll show you specifically how it works. Now specifically, what happens when you actually hit that button? So an emergency occurs in the field, the trigger alert is triggered. That alert is transmitted via, typically by cell, but it can also be done by satellite, to the monitoring center. The alert is transmitted, it is received, and an escalation is initiated. Once it's initiated, the typically trained emergency response folks take control of that emergency, and the emergency is resolved. Now, I mentioned a little bit about the satellite versus cellular. Very, very quickly, the devices that people are using. We're going to show you the actual app that runs on a smartphone. We're very device agnostic, meaning that we can tie just about anything you want into our system. But for the purpose of Work Alone, we're finding most of our customers are using an app that runs on a smartphone. That can be iOS, it can be Android, it can be BlackBerry. It's a very intuitive interface, very easy to use, as you'll see. We also have satellite devices. I've shown a couple there. There's the DeLorme InReach, which is a two-way satellite device, and the little Spot, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. That is a one-way device, and we can certainly, if you've got existing devices that you want to sign in to the system, we can do that for you. As well, we've got a band in the middle, or up in the corner there, that we're showing you. That is something that we developed, which gives you the ability to initiate an SOS through your smartphone without having to actually go into the screen on the smartphone and initiate the SOS. A lot of the enforcement folks are using those so that they can very discreetly and quickly. So that's all right. So apologies. I think we've got that resolved. So that's a pretty overview of the actual devices that we've got. So I've kind of covered what is the program. Hopefully we've helped you identify some of your workers. We've gone into kind of what's, so who are the workers? We've gone into what happens and why we're doing this, which is, of course, safety and compliance. We've talked a little bit about the different devices and so on that are available. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to Kaz from STARS, and he's going to lead you through just an overview of actually a typical incident and what happens on that, and as well Al will be piping in as well and showing you actually what the device looks like, what the application looks like on a smartphone. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Kaz.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks everybody for joining us. Well, Al sorts out some of our screens here. I thought I'd do a quick introduction. As Rob mentioned, my name is Kaz Matsumoto. I am with STARS Air Ambulance. My role at STARS is to basically go out and speak with the external organizations, both private and public and government, and sort of talk about some of the services STARS offers and how it can be implemented and enhance your existing safety programs. Al, if you want to just flip slides there. Okay, so what we thought we would do is sort of walk you through a typical incident that could occur. The scenario being you've got an employee working by themselves, so an employee working in isolation during working hours or even off hours, and he starts to feel some chest discomfort and realizes that he might be having a heart attack. Now, how the system works, and I will show you, but we can actually capture family history or medical conditions that are relevant to that particular employee. So Al's going to show you that part in a few slides here. But going back to this patient, we're going to call him Alan. So Alan, working alone, experiences chest pain, and this is very typical of what we see in STARS world. So to give you some context, we're basically seeing about 60% of our calls being medical events, meaning, Alan having a heart attack, that sort of stuff, or strokes, allergic reactions, while 40% of the incidents that we see are trauma-related, meaning that, somebody getting hit by a car, somebody falling off a ladder, that sort of stuff. About 2 years ago, the statistic was actually flipped, meaning that 60% of it was trauma-related, 40 medical. But we think based on the aging population, we're seeing a trend where people are having a lot more of these medical conditions versus trauma. Now, in 2015 alone, going back to cardiac issues, STARS actually responded to 427 cardiac-related events. So that's basically more than one a day that we've been tasked to respond to. So how do you protect employees for things like that? Well, you use something like a SafetyLink mobile app, and then even enhance it with the wearable SafetyLink band that Rob was speaking about. Now, here's an interesting stat in the corner here. This is from the Heart and Stroke Foundation. For every minute defibrillation is delayed during cardiac arrest, the chance of survival drops by 7 to 10%, and resuscitation is rarely successful beyond 10 minutes. Now, keep that information in your back pocket when I go to demoing how we do the response section. So from here, I'm just going to flip it back to Al, who's actually going to show you a demo of what the app looks like and the functionality of the app if your employees use this device. Go ahead, Al.
Thanks, Kaz. So I'm just going to go through here how our patient Alan would start his day with the app in regards to working alone, and go through some of the other features, as well as eventually how he would end up sending an SOS. So as Rob mentioned earlier, the two main features of the app is to sign in at the beginning of the day and then to sign off when you're done work. So here we can select what time we anticipate to be finished work. So I'm going to say it's 7 o'clock this evening. We can also insert a manual location just for more details, such as I'm going to be working at the office. And then finally, we'll just go ahead and sign on. So now, as far as STARS is concerned, they can see that Alan is at work and he's now actively being monitored by STARS. On the bottom of the screen here, you can see at a quick glance that we're connected to the server, we're connected to STARS, which is the monitor center, which is green, but we have poor GPS just because we're inside. The bottom of the screen, we've also got a couple of different buttons here: assist, emergency, hazard, and check-in. I'll go through those in a second. But you can see that our employer has mandated that we have to check in every roughly 4 hours, just because we're in a low-risk situation. So once every 4 hours at minimum, we're going to have to check in. And we can do that just through the check-in button. You can see that it resets the check-in. Assist would be used, for example, if a non-medical emergency happens whereby I get a flat tire, I just need to call for assistance, or something along those lines. Excuse me. Hazard would be if I'm going into an elevated risk situation. So if I'm doing something that's a little bit more dangerous than normal, and it's going to happen within my safety timer, I can do that. So let's say we're going to be going to check a compressor. Just put in the note. It's going to take me 35 minutes, and I can start. So now if I haven't checked in 35 minutes, STARS is going to start looking for me. Once I'm finished my task, I just end it. I'm out of my high-risk situation. And we'll go back to the normal state of being monitored. Finally, getting back to our example here is if something happens where I'm in dire straits and an emergency occurs, we just go ahead and hit the emergency button, and that'll put it into emergency state. The app will automatically send the emergency in 13 seconds. That'll give me a chance to cancel it if necessary, or I can just go ahead and send it myself. So now we can see that the SOS has been sent, and now STARS is going to action it, and I'll flip it back to Kaz here for a second to talk about that.
Thanks, Al. Okay. So how the escalation works is at the monitoring center, so at STARS here, we instantaneously receive that message. There's a very distinct alarm sound that puts our team into action. Now, as soon as Al actually presses that button, or sorry, Alan presses that emergency button, the device also opens up a voice channel. But what I mean by that is that it actually dials out to STARS so that when our call takers pick up the phone, we may be able to hear additional information that is pertinent to understanding what is going on. So if we look at from a community safety officer who is going out and investigating something and presses that button, and if we can hear what's going on in the background, meaning that there's a verbal confrontation or a physical confrontation that it sounds like, then we can at least initiate an emergency saying, yes, this is a legitimate issue. For Alan's perspective here, who's now having a heart attack, we may be able to hear sounds that we can identify as somebody within medical distress. What we also do is we also record and keep all these recordings for 12 years. So if you need to go back to court for whatever reason, STARS keeps an active log and recording for that period of time. Now, probably the most important thing, of course, is the GPS tracking. So once Alan hits that button, we automatically receive that location information so that we can initiate responses and provide him the location where that alarm is being generated from. Now, from a monitoring sort of, what do we do from our end is that we actually start the escalation process. Now, what that means is that as soon as an alarm is generated, we are averaging 6.1 seconds to take control of that event and start the process of investigation. What we do is we create customized emergency response protocols with the escalation list to support your immediate team member. So usually what we do is we call the individual who's alarming because, you know, sometimes they've missed your check-in, or sometimes it's a false alarm because they, you know, for lack of a better term, bum dialed an emergency to us. So about 80% of those calls that we actually make out as to level 1, they actually pick up the phone and we can just stand down the event or determine that it is a real emergency. The other 20% of them escalate downstream to the escalation list. Usually level 2 is somebody that works closely, either a coworker or a supervisor that's aware of where Alan is at the time. If we get a hold of that individual, then that individual can start the process of investigation. Now, if we can't get to Alan in a timely manner because he's working in such a remote area, our last line of defense is to contact the RCMP, and we would ask them to investigate this. Now, the reason why we would send RCMP and not fire or EMS is that it's an unknown situation until we can get eyes on the person or at least a voice connection. RCMP are trained for unknown situations. They have guns. They have, they have the skills necessary if it is a violent confrontation. While sending an EMS and fire are not trained in those specific examples, so we always will err on the side of caution and send RCMP in. And of course, as we mentioned before, there's the medical history information that we can pull up to say, you know what, maybe Alan's having a heart attack because he's got a family history of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it back to Al one more time, and he's going to show you what the dashboard or the back-end monitoring looks like.
Perfect. Thanks, Kaz. All right. So what you're looking at here is the Aware360 Control Center, what we call the dashboard. You can see at the top here, I'll just give you a quick tour. You've got all of the assets in the top bar. You can see our subject, Alan Malone, currently in an emergency state. You can see over here, we've got our alerts, as well as an activity feed for each asset. So you can see everything that has been going on with Alan alone for the past little while. If we select him, it's going to zoom in, and you can see down here on the map exactly where he's located. In addition, one of the things that our system will show is his nearest neighbors. So for here, we've got Gilbert Grape really close by, as well as Jeff and a bunch of other people, and it'll show you their current status as well. What I'm going to show you then is how this SOS would be actioned by STARS all the way through to resolution. So we can see that the emergencies come in. STARS is going to take action. And what this does is it brings up a call down procedure that the operator can follow. And this is predetermined by the employer. So the first thing we're going to do is try to contact Alan alone and take notes as we go. So obviously he's probably incapacitated, so we tried contacting, but no answer. And we're going to move on to level 2. These notes will all be saved historically and are going to be accessible at any time after the fact for an audit or even just an after the fact event review. So moving on to step 2, we're going to try to contact Robert Beatty. He's the next person in the line. And he does answer the phone. And what he says is to contact the nearest neighbor, who is Gilbert Grape, and to contact an ambulance. So we can go ahead and do that. And then as far as STARS is concerned, once the ambulance has been dispatched, we can resolve the escalation. And that'll take Alan alone out of control of STARS and into the hands of the 911 responders. So as Kaz mentioned, one of the things that STARS does have at their disposal is the ability to see family history or medical notes regards to each asset. So you can see here that they could have made a pretty good guess that Alan was having a heart attack because he does have a family history of heart attacks. So in a nutshell, that's how our dashboard works in relation to actioning and resolving an emergency. So I'm going to give it back to Kaz here for a second, and he'll get into some more depth on his side.
Thanks, Al. Okay, so basically at this point, I'm going to sort of talk about, just give me a sec here. All right. So what we're going to talk about is just being monitored by STARS. What makes this whole entire program unique is it's what we call exception-based alerts. What that basically is that there could be at any time thousands of employees out, but from a STARS perspective, it doesn't matter if you're out. It only matters when you're actually alarming. So the program isn't there to be a big brother to say, oh, you know, Alan's not doing his job, he's hanging out at the pub again. It actually is there only to alert us whenever there is an issue. So once again, that could be an assist, that could be an SOS, it could even be just in this check-in. So from a volume perspective, we're able to handle you know, thousands of units without impacting the ability to manage all those alarms. Now, because we are STARS, we are 24/7, monitored by professionals that are, you know, trained for emergency specific. So our staff is ICS or, you know, Incident Command Structure 100, the Canadian standard. We are trained at ICS 100 level, and managers and directors are up to the 400 level. We also are EMD trained professionals. What that means is we're emergency medical dispatcher trained, which is the standard that most 911 EMS agencies go by, so that whenever we contact them for an emergency, we can speak language that they understand and vice versa. So for an example, this would be you know, if there is a heart attack and we're saying, you know, there's a gentleman by name Alan alone who is actually, you know, having a cardiac event, we would say it's probably a 9 delta that we need to respond to. And they understand from an EMS world what that actually means. So what I'm going to do here, oh, and sorry, and then the next thing, of course, is the neighbor helping neighbor. And this is probably the most fundamental and probably the greatest strength and asset that STARS can bring to any of these medical emergencies. So STARS also does something called site registration and an emergency contact center. What site registration basically means is that people working in remote areas, be it oil and gas, be it agriculture or forestry, any of these industries that potentially have people working in remote areas can actually call and register with STARS. What we do is we take the location information, contact details, and if they have any medical experience on hand to support a mutual aid community. Now, on any given day, when you know, industry is doing well, we have anywhere around 4,600 sites registered on a daily basis. STARS also manages 19 different oil and gas companies through the Emergency Contact Center. So these are your companies such as Husky, Synovus, Encana, ConocoPhillips. If you ever see their emergency line posted anywhere and you call it, it actually terminates at STARS, and STARS manages their emergency response plan based on a prescribed protocol. Now, with all this information in our system, it really provides a large capacity for us to find resources in areas that you may not be aware of. And I'm just going to go into our ArcGIS platform, which will provide you some context of what that actually looks like. So this is our ArcGIS map. Basically, At this point, you can see there's a lot of icons already showing. And if we use this as sort of a place where somebody might be working, all right, so let's just say Alan is right here. So within a 30-kilometer radius, I can pull up various pieces of information. So once again, one of the first things we'll be doing during an emergency is, if it's a confirmed medical emergency, we would be contacting the local EMS group to say, we've got a gentleman who's having a heart attack, this is its location. Now, based on where we are, I can tell you that the nearest EMS bay is actually 30 kilometers away, almost 29.32 kilometers away, this being Allen right here. I can also tell you there's a fire department that's 7 kilometers away. But because we also manage Husky's information through the Emergency Contact Center, I can tell you that there's a Husky facility that's 7 kilometers. Now, as I mentioned before, there was a statistic from the Heart and Stroke Foundation about getting AED support to somebody who's in cardiac arrest. And this is where the site registration comes into play. All of these icons here are the registered sites that STARS is aware of. This is current live data. And so I can see that there's some sites nearby. So here's one right here. But what's more interesting is if you can see the little icon within this one, that actually means that site has an AED present. So if I click on here, we know that it's actually 3.4 kilometers away. So what we would do is, while one person is bringing on EMS services, the other person within the link center would start to contact this site and say, I understand that you guys have an AED and we require it at this location, and hope that they are able to send somebody with that AED. Now, if I look at it here, what the driving time looks like for this area here. Oops. Give me a second here. There we go. So drive time-wise, it's a 4-minute drive for us to contact that individual at that location and to get the EAD available to that individual who's in distress. So these are the things that we can utilize to respond to a medical emergency. It's not just about bringing on EMS services or just about bringing on STARS. It's about getting the closest resource to those individuals to support their response or for their medical issues. And then there was the Fort Mac fires. So this was day 5 of the Fort Mac fires, and I received a call from the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. Now, I've been working with them trying to see how can we share data so that we can support one another during emergencies. Now, we haven't finalized anything yet, but they knew that STARS has a wealth of information that they don't have access to. A lot of what we call the transient data. So they called me on a Saturday night at 7 p.m. and said, hey, Kaz, the Fort Mac fire is now shifting into the rural settings. It's leaving the city of Fort Mac. The winds are high and it keeps shifting. We don't really know who's out there. Now, I knew right off the get-go that we are not monitoring anybody with, for a work loan perspective in the Fort Mac area. But I do know there's a lot of registered sites in that area. So what we did was we actually did a 150-kilometer radius from ground zero, which was Fort Mac, and we provided that information to them. So there was 67 locations that were registered through STARS that we were able to provide them. That included a fishing camp and a boys and girls camp. And we were able to provide that to the Alberta Emergency Management Agency during the fire so that they can start knocking on doors, making phone calls to ensure those people were evacuated as the fire was shifting about. So they even understand the value of our information that is proprietary to STARS, and that is what enhances our ability to respond to any medical emergency. Aaron, if you want to take over from here.
Okay, thanks, Kaz. Appreciate that. So That kind of wraps up sort of the our formal presentation. We've had quite a few questions coming through, and so I wanted to address those. It's Rob here, by the way. I wanted to address those. You know, one of them came through and said, how much does this cost? Under the government standing offer, the cost for the app that would run on a smartphone is $77 per year. So fairly reasonable pricing on that. That does not include the monitoring. The monitoring would be something that, based on the number of folks that you've got monitored and so on, and we can get into more detail on that with you individually for your county and municipality as to how we're going to do that monitoring piece at the back end. So fairly reasonable price for it. Another quick one was, you know, what about employees that don't have cell reception? As I mentioned, the app obviously is for the folks that do have cell reception. For the people that are out in the rural areas where there is no cell, we have the satellite solutions. Typically, the Spot is the most cost-effective, but it's only a one-way device, and so we go satellite is basically what you do if you're out of the cell reception. We've got one here, says, what is the example for medical response is clear. Can you give us a walkthrough of the example, the CPO needing urgent assistance? Okay, so there's a little bit of the typical example that we were going through here would be a worker that would be monitored by STARS Monitoring Center that Kaz went through. The CPOs qualify under the Government of Alberta to be monitored by the Provincial Radio Control Center based out of Edmonton and funded by Service Alberta. So what happens in the event of a CPO signaling for emergency, it goes directly to the Provincial Radio Control Center. It's Khalil certified for enforcement. They communicate back and forth in 10 codes. The app is able to, you can switch in the settings to have it, instead of an emergency, you can put it over to full 10 codes compatibility. Typically in enforcement, a CPO, an enforcement person, typically they have a little bit more equipment in their cars. We're giving them precision mapping in their vehicles. We're giving them the ability to type on a tablet. So it's a little bit more. But in the event of an escalation, similar to what Kaz was talking about, an emergency response operator takes control of that emergency. What they're doing is they are typically looking on a map. They're identifying, like same thing that Kaz was showing you. They're identifying the 3 closest assets to that CPO. Typically, what they're doing is they are trying to dispatch assistance from another CPO. We've had this a couple of times actually happening where one CPO had pulled over a commercial vehicle. He got he set his hazard timer, if you want to call it. He went up to the commercial vehicle, knocked on the door, knocked on the window. The operator jumped out and started physically assaulting the officer. His safety timer expired, and he another CPO, and this was, believe it or not, this is pretty typical, within, basically within sight of his the station. So another CPO happened to be on his way in. They dispatched the other CPO in to help him, and he was able to resolve the situation, and no one was hurt. But that's I guess a little bit of what we do for the CPOs. It's a slightly different system. Some CPOs are using simply the app, but as I mentioned, a lot of the CPOs we're hardwiring devices that communicate both through cellular and satellite into their vehicles if required, and we're giving them the availability to see themselves and the other CPOs and enforcement folks on a high precision mapping on their screen. So that's kind of a long example for CPOs, but do give me a call and I can give you more details, and we're going to put I've got my contact details up on the screen there. So hopefully that answers your question. Another one here, does STARS support after-hour support? Yes, they do. In many cases, and I'm going to answer actually 2 questions here. There was another one about can we just do 3 workers? The system can be self-monitored. By that, what I mean is, someone had asked, if I've got 3 workers, can we have someone within the county or municipality monitor those 3? Yes, we can. And as far as after-hour support of STARS, we do have some customers out there that are monitoring their folks during the day. if they've got enough operators and so on to give that coverage. And then after hours, you can switch that over to STARS for the after hours support for after hours folks. So hopefully that answers that question. We've got another one here in regards to escalation. How does that work? Typically, we set up 4 levels of escalation for an individual. The we allow scripting in the escalations, meaning that typically, it's individuals. So the first thing we do is we try to get a hold of the individual by whatever means possible to say, hey, are you okay? When that's not successful, typically we would go into a supervisor, then we would go into perhaps a director, or depending on whatever you want, we can set up the levels of escalation. Now, one of the things in the system, we have the ability to set up multiple levels of escalation and put them into a template that can be assigned. So say you've got, we've got a lot of folks down in gas workers where the escalation is the same for all the members. We set up a template once. We basically apply it to all of that work group or those groups, and so it's all the same, and we can go through and change that template if we needed to. Let me see. Are we going to send out an overview of the presentation? Yes, sir, we are. Absolutely. And the services provided, I can get into that specifically with you for your use cases, so I can send that out to you as well. You're evaluating lone worker app services, looking at other programs, need information to compare costs, etc. Absolutely. We welcome the opportunity to compare. Under the government standing offer, one of the things, we encourage, and I'm familiar with the other options that are out there in the marketplace, and I'd certainly like to address those. Under the government program, you'll find that it's very cost effective. That there is a government standing offer, so you can take advantage of the pre-negotiated rates and are able to purchase it going through a lot of procurement issues that may require you to get quotes and so on and so forth. But absolutely, we can address that. If you want to get a hold of me, I would be more than happy to do that, and I'll follow up with the individual who asked this one question right away to get some information, additional information on the costs associated with the program. So I think that's just about I don't see any other questions coming up here.
There was a question on there, Rob, about if using satellite devices like InReach, would you just pay for monitoring and not the app?
So when you go with the satellite monitoring, you don't. Typically what we do is we can set it up, it's based on use case. And my apologies, I didn't get that question sent through here. But based on use case, in many cases what we do is we can assign multiple devices to an individual or to an asset. So typically we may have an individual who is leaving the office in the morning. They can sign on to a shift or they can sign off shift using the app. Then what they do is if they say, hey, now I'm going out into a satellite only area, or I'm leaving cellular coverage area, then I can simply turn on my satellite device, and the monitoring center will know that that satellite device is in fact assigned to me, and it will seamlessly move me over to the satellite device so that I'm continuing to be monitored out of the cellular area into the satellite area. So that would say be one use case. Another one would be we can as well share satellite devices. That would require someone, and again, this is where someone who needs the app or is using the app sort of to start or end their shift. In this case, hey, I'm proceeding out into a satellite only area. I need this device today. They'd have to call the monitoring center and advise them that, hey, I'm proceeding into a cellular. Please assign this device to me for the day, kind of thing. Then in another use case, which would be typical of a fish and wildlife folks, where they don't want to go through the apps, they don't have a smartphone, they say, give me a spot. They turn the spot on, they start the tracking in the morning, they basically sign in, it's the beginning of shift, end of shift. I mean, we have the capability to give you the safety timers and so on, but typically, because it's a one-way device, we say, here's the spot. they turn it in, turn it on at beginning of shift. That starts a shift timer for a predetermined time, and then they're required to check out at the end of shift. The reason that we simplify it, it may not be as compliant, but the reason we simplify it is that people, just from experience we're finding, are not able to, in some cases, get to that 2-hour, safety timer throughout the day. They're of course covered by the SOS availability throughout the day, but the unfortunate thing is if they go over on a safety timer, we're unable to contact them to see, hey, is it just that you are busy with doing something and you've forgotten to check in, and we all of a sudden start dispatching emergency services to the individual's location, and they've just forgot to do their safety check-in. So in that case, you do not need the app. You can run the Work Alone solution from just a satellite app. I think that was your question, Cass, that you had there. So I think that's about all the questions that we've got, and it looks like we're coming right up to our timing here. So you've got our information there on the screen. You've got mine and you've got Kaz's. Please do feel free to send me an email or to just give me a phone call. I'd be more than happy to address specific use cases and make sure that it's the most cost-effective solution for you, and so it fits into what your requirements are. We do appreciate you taking the time out today, and hopefully you found this useful. I think you'll get some follow-up from our folks on this, as far as how how useful this was for you. The slides and the recordings and so on, this has been recorded. It will all be posted. So if you're more than happy to, you can take a look at it at a later date. So without further ado, I want to thank you for showing up, and please feel free to give Kaz or I a call if we can assist you in any way. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much.